Making statistics accessible using syntax or code versus point and click with SPSS. Pathways 12, 2014. A demonstration by Kim Lowe, School of Psychology, the University of Western Australia.
I'm studying a PhD and Masters in Industrial Psychology, and I'm just about to complete my PhD and Masters this year. I lecture and tutor in statistics and research methods. One of the big components in a psychology degree, which a lot of people don't realise, is there's a lot of statistics involved. So when you teach research methods, actually it's kind of a non-scary code word for we're going to teach you about statistics. This semester, this is my first semester, and teaching someone who was visually impaired, and so I started that at the start of this year. It was a really interesting challenge. When you teach statistics, or at least the way I'm used to teaching statistics, a lot of it is about getting students to think about it in a visual space. So if I'm thinking about a problem, I'll ask them to think about it in terms of a graph or in terms of a picture, and I'll draw it up on the whiteboard. But when you're teaching someone who's visually impaired, obviously that doesn't work as well and doesn't translate as well. So you have to think about trying to translate what you're doing on the board that's a visual representation, try and translate that into words, which was a bit of a challenge actually. So we, in this particular course, use a statistical program called SPSS. It's basically just a really big number cruncher, that's all it's designed to do. There are a number of different programs out there that do similar things, so something like SAS or R do very similar things, but we use SPSS in that third year unit to be able to do any of the analyses. When we teach them how to do the statistics, we often give them, well, the way I like to teach it at least, is I'll go through an example showing them on the board specifically what buttons to click and how to get to the answer that they need. Then they'll have another example where they do it on their own, but I prompt them with the specific things they need to click and select, and then they do one on their own. The challenge when you have a visually impaired student is being able to, one, keep up with the class. If you imagine that I would teach those 3 different examples and 3 different types of doing things, that maybe takes half an hour. But if you're having to listen and find each of those buttons using a screen reader, it can take easily twice as long. So in order to make sure that the student could keep up with the rest of the students, I thought, after listening to the problems that they were having with SPSS, using this specific method called a point and click method, basically just using menus and toolbars, probably what you're most familiar with using any kind of program, I suggested maybe we should look at it in a different way and use something called syntax.
An on-screen demonstration of SPSS and the point and click method.
All right, so I want you to imagine for a second that you're not a sighted person, and just listen to the instructions that I'm going to give to do this analysis. All right, first of all, I want you to click on Analyze. Then I want you to go down to Compare Means and select One Way ANOVA. I then want you to put in the depression score into dependent list and the group into factor. Then click on Post Hoc and find Bonferroni and make sure that is selected. Once you've done that, click Continue, then move to Options, select Descriptives and Homogeneity of Variance Test, click Continue, and once you've done that, you can go ahead and click OK. Now, hopefully that was a bit illustrative of how difficult that would be, but also just to give you an idea, that's not any faster or slower than I would go in a general class. So that is quite complicated to do if you're not a sighted person.
An on-screen demonstration using SPSS and syntax or code.
To do it using syntax, from an instructor point of view, there's a really easy way of getting to syntax. Basically, you can use the exact same point and click options that you've used before. So you would go to your Compare Means, One Way ANOVA. It's already set up here, but you would go to this, select all the options you need, and instead of clicking OK here to run it, you would click Paste Now, this just pastes what you've done, what you've selected, into syntax. It's now gone ahead and pasted that in there. So here we've got what the analysis that we've just selected is. To run this in a syntax way, if you were the student, you could type in all of these different instructions into this syntax folder and it would run it. But from an instructor point of view, you don't actually need to do any additional things to be able to get here. You just need to click paste, and then you could save this for your student. So now to run this, you would just select it and click Run Selection, which is that green arrow, and you can use that with your keyboard as well. And we've now run it, and you should see that we have the same analyses that we had before using the point and click method.
Final thoughts.
Using syntax gets around some of the problems of actually doing the analysis, but getting to the point of trying to understand what the numbers are saying is just as complicated using syntax and the point and click method, because it's very difficult to interpret tables in particular if you're not a sighted person. Tables require listening across to each, across columns, then listening down rows, and then somehow finding the correct number in a sea of tables and numbers. And SPSS gives you a lot of numbers and output. Syntax allows you to reduce some of them, and as an instructor you can be helpful in reducing the number of tables, and that's certainly something I tried to keep in mind as much as possible, balancing getting the important information, but also balancing that with trying to have the least amount of information there. So that's something to consider. I guess the other thing with syntax is that it does take some time to be able to understand it. At a third year or an undergraduate level, your instructor might be providing you with prompts of syntax, but as you move on into writing syntax yourself, that does take some time to be able to understand and to be able to sort of write and generate your own syntax. But it is fairly intuitive, and it's something that you can learn with a bit of time. In terms of setting UNA up for a long-term degree, especially going into honours or masters, using the syntax version actually puts her ahead, in my opinion, of other students that are using point and clicks. Personally, it has changed quite a lot of the way I see how we teach people at universities, and I think that it has definitely made me, well, I'm certainly in awe of this particular student UNA, and as well as other visually impaired students, because so much of the way teaching is structured is around pictures and looking at visual space, and just the amount of time that it takes to be able to read a document using a screen reader is phenomenal. So the amount of time that takes and the dedication that takes, that personally has made me think about that.